Heading off on a long-awaited getaway. WildEarth explorers, it's in your nature. The Mara Triangle is a jewel in the Kenyan conservation crown, and thanks to the dedication of the Mara Conservancy, it thrives as one of Earth's greatest national treasures.
We have been experiencing a reduction in the whale snails that we collect on a monthly basis. And this is basically attributed to our intense patrols.
Over the years, this courageous team of anti-poachers has reduced poaching to almost zero.
Mimi naitwa Stephen Olereso. Nimefanya kazi miaka 16 sasa. Kuanzia miaka 2002. Hao wanadamu ni wenye utua sana inaogofya ni wale wenye wanaenda kama ndovu. Wanatumia kama bunduki. Sasa hiyo ndio huwa inakuanga hatari sana kwa sisi.
As a result of the global pandemic and the massive reduction in tourist revenue, the Mara Triangle is facing a financial crisis. They need your help if they are to continue their ability to protect this magical land.
My name is Steve, and one of my favorite things at WildEarth is getting questions from you. The type of questions that I really like are those ones that really help us to unpack and understand and really integrate the ecological knowledge and fully appreciate the importance that animals such as these Cape buffalo bring to the ecosystem. If you want to ask a question on WildEarth, you're going to have to register on the website. But once registered, just head on over to the live Safari page and enter your question under the live feed.
And welcome to andBeyond Phinda Private Game Reserve. My name is Charlie DeForce and I'm one of the ecological monitors here at andBeyond Phinda. And tonight on WildEarth we're talking about a very special creature, the pangolin, and the remarkable pangolin reintroduction taking place here at andBeyond Phinda. Joining us tonight we have Craig, Nikki and Ray, but I'll let them each introduce themselves. Craig.
Hi, good evening. My name is Craig Shelter Douglas. I'm the reserve ecologist here at Phinda. I've been involved in the research and monitoring here at the reserve, and in particular with tonight's conversation with some of the startup points of the reintroduction of pangolin into this area, and then the post-release monitoring and some of the research that we're doing alongside the project.
Nikki.
Hi everybody, I'm Nikki Wright. I'm a wildlife rehabilitation specialist and I work for the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital, and we get a lot of the pangolins in that come off the trade. I'm also the executive director for the African Pangolin Working Group, and my work is all supported by the Humane Society International Africa.
And Ray.
Hi everybody, I'm Ray Jansen. I'm the founder and chairperson of the African Pangolin Working Group. I'm also appointed as a professor at Tshwane University of Technology, and now I'm a batty pangolin biologist.
On WildEarth, it's always an extreme pleasure seeing a pangolin. Have a look at some of our guides' reaction at seeing one in the wild.
Guys, it's a pangolin! It's a pangolin! The first pangolin ever on Safari Live!
Well, everyone, you will not believe it. We have a pangolin for you. Can you believe this? Now, some people think it's a reptile because of its scales. It's not. It's not at all. It's 100% a mammal, and it's in its own little order called Pholidota. The Pholidota order.
How amazing, everybody! We went out today in search of a pangolin. You can hear it walking through the long grass. I'm so excited. We've got Marcel behind the camera, absolutely losing his mind. This particular species of pangolin is known as a Temminck's pangolin. It is one of 4 species that we get in Africa. Yes! Look there, walking on his 2 back feet with his front feet busy tucked in. Absolutely incredible.
We have a baby pangolin, a baby pangolin. This is the most incredible thing. I know I keep saying this. Here's a baby pangolin, guys. We've been hoping, we're looking for something completely different. This is off the charts. This animal is about from your fingertips to your elbow. That's the total length of this animal. Oh my word.
As As you can see, people always get very excited when they get to see a pangolin in the wild. Craig, how did you feel the first time you got to see a pangolin?
Yeah, it was an experience I'll never forget. I think a lot of people who work and live in the bush, sometimes their whole lives, will never see one. So when Nikki and Ray came to Phinda almost 2 years ago now, over 2 years ago now, and they opened up this box and this little charismatic artichoke in low range came crawling out. It was a really, really special moment, and I think knowing that, you know, those were possibly the first two that have walked in this area for close to 40 years was a really, really special memory that I'll never forget.
And Nikki, your first reaction to your first encounter?
Wow, it was such a long time ago when somebody put a pangolin into my arms at a rehab facility, and it was sort of half wrapped in a towel, and I struggled to hold it. I didn't know, you know, it was hard and it was moving, and I could feel its strength inside this unwielding bundle. It was the most extraordinary thing, and then this little face poked out, and I saw what it was, and it was just mesmerizing. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely lovely. And then, Ray, very few people know anything about a pangolin. How many species of pangolin are there worldwide?
Yeah, there are 8 species of pangolin in the world, 4 in Asia, 4 in Africa, and we're very blessed in southern Africa to have one of the ground-dwelling pangolin species, the Temminck's pangolin, and its range is quite far. From southern Africa all along the eastern seaboard right up into northern part of Chad, so very wide distribution. The Temminck's is the only one that walks on its hind feet. It's bipedal like people, so we can almost say that it's got 2 arms and 2 legs. All the other pangolins are quadrupeds. They walk on all 4 feet. The other ground-dwelling species is the giant ground pangolin occurring in central and western part of Africa, but that one's really, really threatened and in big trouble. And then you've got the 2 little charismatic tree-dwelling species, the white-bellied pangolin and the black-bellied pangolin, and they predominantly live up in the trees, but the white-bellied pangolin does come down more often than the black-bellied. And the black-bellied pangolin, as far as I know, is the only diurnal species that actually comes out during the day. So 4 species in Africa and 4 species in Asia.
Absolutely amazing. I don't think most people know that about them. Yeah. So in 2019, andBeyond Phinda started this reintroduction program together with the African Pangolin Working Group and the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital, in which we started reintroducing pangolins back into an area where they've gone locally extinct. With this, all the pangolins reintroduced here come out of the illegal wildlife trade, and this has given us all a first-hand experience to get to know quite a large number of different individual pangolins and to see how different they are. Have a look for yourself.
All of our pangolins vary, and we think it's to do with where they originally came from. Some pangolins will prefer your rocky crevices, some will only sleep in warthog burrows, others always go into drainage lines. But apart from that, we also get different individuals. Some individuals will move around abnormal when they detect a human around them, but others are extremely protective. So even if we are still quite far from them, they'll go into their ball. They're also quite inquisitive. Sometimes you'll see them standing on their 2 hind legs, just smelling around, seeing where you are. But yeah, they all are very different, and what we have noticed so far is that the males tend to be a little bit more relaxed, where the females, they're really hard and they wander all over. Pangolins, they will roll into a ball when they feel very threatened. They are trying to protect their belly. You will see that the belly is very soft, leathery skin, where everything else is covered in scales. So they'll roll their head in first and then their tail over to protect that very vulnerable area. Not even a hyena with a very strong bite force can bite through those hard keratin scales.
So we got a question from Jeremy asking us if the name pangolin means anything. I'm going to ask Ray this question. I can see he's beaming to answer.
I don't know if I have all the answers, but it's a Malay term for pangolin, which means to roll up into a tight ball. So it has got origins from one of the places that has pangolins naturally. So it's pangolin isn't actually pronounced the right way. I think we'll have to ask a Malay person exactly how to pronounce it. But its origins are to roll up in a tight ball.
Thank you, and thank you, Jeremy, for the question. But as you all saw in the video clip, that they're all quite unique as different individuals. I'm going to ask Nikki if she's had some individuals that have stood out to her or who's made quite an impression, and why those specific ones.
Yeah, you're quite right. They all have their own personalities, and even though they've been through such trauma and abuse and hardship in the trade when they've been poached, some of them really stand out because they relax with us after a short period of time and sort of trust us and almost form a bond with us while we've got them at the hospital. And they're just much more relaxed than others. So some will be naturally a lot more nervous and want to get away from us, which is absolutely fine, especially when we come down here to release them. But others are a lot more relaxed. So they're all very different personalities.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And then Craig, in your time working with them, have you gotten a favourite? And reason for that specific individual being your favourite?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. They all, as Nikki's mentioned, they all have their own little characters, and I think firstly it's amazing that some of them, and the majority of them, actually get to the stage where they start to retrust people after everything that they've been through. But I do have a favourite actually, is the first one that was brought here at the end of May 2019, and he just had a really unique story and a great character, and he got pneumonia sort of a month after he was released, and that's because they've been in the trade for not, we don't always know for how long, but they often pick up conditions, and they have underlying conditions that only kind of come to the front a little bit later on. And so the whole release went really well, and then we actually noticed through our pretty intensive monitoring that this individual had picked up pneumonia, and there was a drastic weight loss. We had to bring him back in, and we're just so grateful that we managed to get him in time, and we had to get onto Zoom calls with the vets up in Joburg with Nikki and her team and build a little nebulizer, and we managed to pull him through, and he arrived here at just over 9 kilograms. He dropped to under 8 when he had pneumonia, and now he's the biggest territorial male, and he weighs over 16 kilograms. So a really nice story, and I think because he was the first one, he showed us that the whole project is feasible.
Yeah. We also have a question from Jen, who's asking us, how is the baby pangolin comfortable on the mom's back with all those scales? And I think, Nikki, you might have seen it more often than anyone else of us. Can you answer Jen's question for us?
Well, I think it's a very natural way for the babies to ride and be carried by their mums. So instinctively they know exactly what to do. And they've got little claws, quite sharp little claws, and they can hold on with those claws, attach them around the scales and hang on. And they're strong. Those little babies are quite strong. They also, don't forget, use their tail, and their tail has got a huge, strong muscle in it, and so they clamp onto the mum and ride along like that.
Amazing. And then Norm has a follow question up on that. He wants to know how and when does the pangolin scales develop on the babies?
Well, they're born with their scales. So when they're born, they have these soft little shell-like pink scales, which are quite closed. And as they get older, those scales start to get drier and drier, and they lift up, so they become more individualized. And they get harder and harder as time goes on. So, yeah, they start off with their scales, but they just change ever so slightly as they mature.
Yeah. So some of us have seen it firsthand. Those scales are quite soft and flexible initially when they start off, and then over time they do become harder, as Nikki was explaining.
Yes.
And they also actually start to take colour.
Yes, that's right.
It's a little bit see-through in the beginning, and then it becomes darker as they get older, and a lot stronger as well.
A lot stronger, and that edge is so sharp. It's like a razor blade, the edge of each scale, yeah. And every pangolin's got its own colouring as well. Yes. They're all quite different.
Yeah. I think Craig's got nicked the most out of all of us, those scales.
Yeah, I've got a few battle scars to show for it. But yeah, you know, it's quite incredible how powerful they are, as you were saying, and they actually use those scales to rub against each other, and they flick with their tails, and that's part of their defensive mechanism. I mean, these animals at adulthood, they don't have any actual natural predators, at least terrestrial ones, apart from people. So they obviously are well equipped to protect themselves, and I think the scales are the first line of defense.
And then apart from that, both myself and Craig, we work directly with andBeyond Phinda, but Ray and Nikki, they take part in the project hand in hand, but on different degrees. I think let's have a closer look to see exactly the details of this reintroduction project and how it all takes place.
This is the first time a project like this has ever been done to try and reintroduce pangolins into an area that it's going locally extinct. What we're trying to get out of this is to learn more about these highly elusive animals. What is their diet? What is their feeding behavior? Nobody even knows what the gestation period is.
I'm helping with the soft release process of one of the newly introduced pangolins. She was confiscated from a community in Limpopo. Sting operation found her, confiscated her from poachers, and then brought her to the hospital where she was rehabilitated, the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet. Then they gave her to us, and now we are doing the soft release process. Every day when she wakes up, we'll bring her out to the plains here so that she can feed, get some ants, some termites, and pick up some weight. Then once she reaches her desired weight, we will release her fully and she'll be on her own.
Foraging walks last anything from 3 to 4 hours in general, where we'll take the animal to its designated release site and we'll physically observe, is it feeding? Is it picking up weight? So sometimes even though we're observing it feeding, there might not be enough resources within that nest that it's found to actually pick up weight.
We would like her to reach a desired weight of around 6.5 kgs. That's just with ethics. With putting trackers on animals, they have to be a certain percentage of the body weight. And once you reach 6.5, there'll be that correct percentage.
Unfortunately, unlike lion or cheetah, you can't put it into a boma. They're very, very selective feeders. They don't feed in captivity at all. It's taken us quite a while to figure out what each individual wants. We think it is to do with where they originally came from. So the soft release allows us as the researchers to see that it is adapting to its new environment and just to decrease their stress load of being exposed to a new area.
So we have a question from Gab, and she wants to know how long does the pangolin rehabilitation process takes? Nikki, working with the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital, think you'll be best able to answer Gab's question.
Sure. Hi Gabs. It depends on what that pangolin presents with. So some of them are really, really compromised and they might need intense treatment and a much longer stay. It can be up to a couple of months, and others come in and they're not too bad, and we can get them sort of fixed up and out as soon as possible, which is to their benefit. You know, it's best to try and get them back into the wild as soon as we possibly can. But as soon as from a veterinary perspective, they're okay. And then also from a rehab perspective, you want them to be, I want to say emotionally and mentally kind of stable and calm, and then they're okay to go. So when all of those things come together, an animal's in perfect health, then they can go. But it all varies, depends on the pangolin.
But maybe I can just add, the rehabilitation of a unicorn is not a simple thing as, you know. Yeah, thanks. Quite a complex question, Gab, and I think a very important one, because we need to give the best for these compromised animals, because they've been in the wildlife trade, so they're both mentally and physically compromised. So sometimes we get a pangolin that we think's from Mozambique, and then we try and release it closer to the Mozambique border or Swaziland border, and there are no ants that they like there, you know. And then we suddenly decide, well, let's just try the Botswana border, and all of a sudden this pangolin just goes crazy and starts eating pugnacious ants. So they've got favourite appetites and favourite ants. And our release sites also need to be very large, because we're faced with problems such as electric fences, which are a huge threat to pangolins. So a place like Phinda, which is huge, large, with a fantastic team on the ground, is just as important. And we've got fantastic teams up in Limpopo as well that have secured really good reserve sites for release, and we need landowners buy-in. So these rehabilitation programs can extend even up to 12 months for every single pangolin. So as it comes into the hospital, into ICU, then it discharged from hospital, and then it goes into a release program. The program can go on for many, many months. So it's quite a complex story, and it's not a quick fix solution of just opening the release box and letting them go. But we're getting better at it every single year, and with every pangolin.
Well, each pangolin teaches us so much because they're all so different. So we learn every time, just as we think we kind of got a handle on it, we realise that we've got
a unique one.
Another thing to learn from another pangolin,
And the older ones are more difficult.
Yes, exactly.
And that process extends to when they come to their release reserves. I mean, we've had some, like the one we've been working with today, on day 2, just decided, I'm happy, feeling well, into a burrow, whereas others are up to 3-4 months of continually trying in new areas, trying to find out what ants and termite species they prefer and want to feed on, if they've got enough shelter in the form of burrows in a certain area. So I think it all comes back to how unique each individual is and how much they vary.
You can walk 10 k's in one night. That little bipedal animal just gaps it. That's why in the videos you'll see 2 little objects on their backs. One is a very high frequency transmitter, VHF, and the other one is a satellite transmitter, because in which you get 3 to 5 kilometer range with a VHF, and he walks 10 kilometers, so hence we put on the satellite tags in the beginning. So it's an expensive process, but if we want to monitor these poor patients, then we need to do what we need to do.
We do.
Yeah, and I mean, we've learned firsthand how important that is. I mean, if we think about we've had some that have gone 10 kilometers in a straight line through the mountains in one evening, and I think if we didn't have those kind of tracking devices, we would have lost them for good. Yeah.
So just to let the viewers know, our audio is a little bit out of sync, but we are coming to you live from the African bush, and as we like to say, this is Africa and things don't always go according to plan, so we do apologise for that from our side. But then we have a question from Heather as well. She wants to know how long each of us have been involved working with pangolins, and I'll start off. Myself, I've only started working with pangolins in June 2019 when we started with this reintroduction project here at Phinda, and I think for Craig, he started working with pangolins at the same stage, but Ray and Nikki has been working with them for a little bit longer. Ray, how long have you been involved with pangolins?
I started working on pangolins, saw my first unicorn in 2009, so that's about 11, 12 years ago, and I'm actually an ornithologist, so these things have turned my life, I don't know, right way around or upside down, I'm not quite sure, but a bit of both, and I think Nikki's pretty much the same.
Absolutely, yeah. So the first time I had a pangolin in my arms was 2008. And then they just came in more and more often, and they just hook you, and that's it. We're all hooked.
We're pretty much hooked. I think we've collectively in the last decade between us about 160 pangolins. Some good news stories, others not so good, but we thrive off the good news stories, and Phinda's one of those.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then we have another question from Cass Wayne. She wants to know, how long has the pangolin been critically endangered for?
Maybe I can answer that. So there are different levels of endangered according to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. It sort of ranges from near threatened to vulnerable to threatened to endangered and then finally extinct. So there are 2 species of Asian pangolin that are critically endangered, and the next level is extinct in the wild, and 1 species of pangolin that's critically endangered in Africa. The Temminck's pangolin in the southern part of Africa is still considered vulnerable, but if they're on the IUCN red list of threatened species, then they're all pretty much in trouble to some degree or another. But if we don't do something pretty soon, like what's happening here, then the whole order, the Foliodota, could be in trouble.
I mean, just to kind of put that into context, if we think about sort of the stats we were talking about in 2019, 60 tons of pangolin scale being, recovered before leaving the African continent. I mean, we worked that out to sort of 190,000 adult pangolins, and so part of the whole classification of how threatened they are requires data and information. And because these animals, without the research and the tracking devices that we're using, without us gaining this knowledge, there's no ways of even telling how many there are to start with.
Exactly, you can't
so it's quite difficult to use that as the one and only sort of measure. Yeah. But I think as long as we do more and more of the stuff that we're doing here, and more and more we learn about territories and home ranges, how they meet up, how they breed, I think hopefully we can replicate it elsewhere and, excuse the pun, scale up.
Scale up the conservation.
Talking about scaling it up, Robin wants to know, is there a way that people can help fund the pangolin reintroduction program here at Phinda? I think, Craig, I'm going to hand over to you first.
Yeah, thanks. I think first and foremost, by watching this and being involved, we creating awareness. As soon as we can start getting people to perceive animals as being charismatic and talking about them, I think that's sort of half the battle won. So awareness, educating your friends and family about pangolin and the threats they're facing, and how, by protecting pangolin, we're also protecting a whole lot of other species. But in terms of direct funding, it obviously a lot of money goes into running these kind of projects, and so we've got a joint system between the African Pangolin Working Group, the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital, and then our pangolin project here on the ground, and any support is very welcome and will be very appreciated. It goes into the running costs of these projects, such as tags and vehicles and monitoring equipment, and so I'm sure we'll be able to get hold of you and get your details, and we can talk a bit further.
Yeah, and I think you guys also at the veterinary hospital always rely quite a fair bit on people helping out as well.
Yes, well, the African Pangolin Working Group and the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet are both NGOs, and I mean we work hard, and we have to save these pangolins. So we all, both NGOs, rely on public donation, and people are incredibly generous and helpful, and that's what keeps us going and keeps us motivated.
And then we have another question from Bill, who wants to know, do we think that the pangolin poaching went up during the COVID-19 pandemic, or did we see a decrease in pangolin poaching?
Thanks, Bill. I'm quite involved in that dark side of things. I'm going to answer a question on two sides. So the African continent south of the Sahara, end of 2019 was 97 tons of scales that I know of that was intercepted, and that's only what we know of, which equates to 170,000 individuals. Then in 2020, it was end of February, about 10 tons, and then as the pandemic hit the country and hit the world, and there was global shutdown of markets and airports and harbours and ports, it flatlined for the rest of the year, literally flatlined. But we're pretty aware that stockpiling was carrying on in certain parts of Africa, in particular the countries in the Gulf of Guinea, also countries in Asia that I know of, in particular stockpiling in Vietnam. So I don't think it stopped, but I think the movement of the contraband within export out of Africa came to a grinding halt, but I don't think there was any significant reduction to any great degree. We always, of course, hope there was. More locally, in South Africa, if we look at 2019, we intercepted 36 pangolins in this country, and it was actually more in 2020 during the lockdown in the pandemic, was 38 individuals, and as of Tuesday this year, 12 individuals, so it's about the same as last year. So, but it's people losing their jobs and lack of funding and feeding families. It's a horrible, dirty story where people are desperate and revert to crime. And one of those crimes is wildlife crime. So it's not always a nice tale. But I think the pandemic hasn't to any greater or lesser extent reduced the trade and the levels of poaching. To a certain extent, it may have increased poaching on small game as well to feed families. So it's not a nice story.
And then we also have another question from Horse Lover, who would like to know what can they as viewers do to increase people's knowledge on the pangolin and the plight of the pangolin. I think, like us here tonight, just starting a conversation, talking to other people about it. There's so many people out there that don't know what a pangolin is. They often get mistaken for an armadillo. We actually all joked about it outside a little bit earlier tonight, that people are so aware of what an armadillo is, but they really don't know what's the difference between an armadillo and a pangolin. And I think it's that talking to people about it raises questions, and once questions are raised, people start doing research into it, whether it might be tapping into Google or social media to see what a pangolin is. And then once that spark is lightened, then they'll start looking more into the plight of the pangolin and the trafficked side as well.
I think one of the amazing things about these unique, magical, mystical, bewitching mammals is they're the only mammals covered in hard keratinous overlapping scales. They've got a ton, more than 2/3 the length of their body that's stored in a cavity below the stomach, and they don't really have any functional movable jaws, So they're so unique. We don't even know how they communicate. We're still doing research on behavioral mechanisms, such as how does one communicate to another. We released that one on and it was 7 kilometers away. The two males came together.
Yeah.
How on earth, So I think when the world starts to realize how special they are, 85 million years of evolution, their closest molecular genetic relative is a cat. It's just bizarre, We should know more about them, and we know so little, and we're learning so much every single year from each individual. You guys have got lots of stories on individuals.
How often have we not asked or raised the answer to say, sorry, I don't know the answer to that question
Exactly.
when it comes to pangolins. But on that, we also have a question from Aardwolf, who would like to know what is the reproductive rate and lifespan of the pangolin. And I think it's one of those the same ones where we like to go like, we don't know. The lifespan of the pangolin, as far as I know, it's never been documented. Nobody's ever recorded a pangolin from birth all the way to death. There's some estimates out there, but it's only estimates. And then the reproductive rate as well, it's also quite a rough estimate. If my knowledge has it correct, it's every second year.
Yeah, well, we think it is about every second year, don't we, Ray?
We kind of think annually, but it doesn't always work out like that, because these mammals with long recruitment and they pup with them a long time, at least annually, but probably every second year, and longevity we think around 15, 16, like a domestic cat, but it may be up to 20, because their physiology and their metabolism is to a certain extent a lot lower. And we always think of, if you use so many heartbeats up in a lifespan, your small animals got such a fast heartbeat, and they only live 2 years, and then these animals with 3 heartbeats in a minute, like whales, can live 300 years. So I don't know, maybe 20 years, I don't know. We just don't know.
That's why it's so important. We have babies that we've hand reared,
that we can follow them,
and hopefully that project will just continue until we know what the outcome is finally. If they die of old age in their rocking chair, we don't know.
And then another one of those we don't know questions.
But we're going to find out.
That we've just gotten in is, do pangolins mate for life?
No. So they're not really polygamous either. But it's kind of one of those stories where you'd have these territorial males, and they look after their territories, and they bash away the other males. So they're quite competitive for quality territories. And then you got the girls walking through, and they either like the boy or they like the boy's house. So it's either the habitat or the guy himself. But that's another thing. We've got so much to learn, hey, Nikki? I mean, you guys now will start getting a lot more data, hey, Craig, on territory behaviour.
I think so. I mean, I think the fact that we've managed to document the birth of the pup on the reserve and to monitor that pup with camera traps and now finally get a small transmitter onto it and be able to work out when it's away from the mom and when they're foraging in different areas. This data is all going to help us answer some of these questions, and I think especially with some of the hand-raised ones that were recovered soon after birth, that have now gone through this whole rehabilitation process with Nikki and now coming into the wild. We've been able to sort of document missing pieces of information that we've never had before. So hopefully in a few years, when we're all sitting here chatting about this again, we'll be able to answer a few more of those questions.
But some of the interesting things we've seen in our Limpopo release site was also one of our pangolins that was retrieved out of the trade that when she was pregnant gave birth in the wild, which is such a good news story. You've got a trade captive animal, goes back to the wild and has a free pup, and on the camera trap we saw a wild male visiting her and her pup, going in, greeting them, and we have things like infanticide where we didn't know if the males would kill the female to bring her back into season, but he didn't, and he visited her on more than one occasion with the pup. So we don't know what contribution males actually make to the rearing the family. In some situations it may just be providing a protective environment, if anything. But all of those questions we need answers for, which are important in terms of conserving this, a species and a group of these species.
Yeah. So many questions that we still don't have answers for, but hoping to answer as we get to know the pangolins a little bit more. But on the education aspect, Judy Wilkes wants to know, is there a school program that is out there helping to educate young people on pangolins?
Nikki and I, through our organisation and our other board members are having talks and actually launched within, I think this week we saw the printing of at least 500 copies through a collective collaborative organisation of primary school children workbooks where they've got various projects such as what we know as crosswords and snakes and ladders for pangolins and finding the pangolin's burrow and stuff. So we didn't develop them ourselves, but we're supporting initiatives and we're actually learning on how to do that from other non-profits, because this is the next step, is to get into the youth. And
yeah, well, those were printed by Blue Sky.
They were Blue Sky, yeah.
And they've also been translated into Zulu from the English. So they've been distributed down here around Phinda into the communities around Phinda, which is great. And I think that's the way to start, is to get information into the schools, to inspire the kids.
And people, organisations like Tanglewood, I think, were also heavily involved in supporting that.
They funded that project, which is remarkable, and that's how communities can support projects like this.
The youth is so important. So I think for our small organisation, it's the next important step. But we're going through a learning process from others that have been down this road on best practice and ethical practice and how to get it into these rural schools. I think that's the target where the pangolins are, and conservation initiatives in those conservation communities.
Absolutely.
And I mean that's what we sort of, when we last spoke last year, we started looking into that, and so we managed to bring in five students from the neighbouring communities, and they did a 6-month course with us, and we trained them up on everything but a lot of pangolin related stuff, and now they're going every week and they're doing conservation lessons in the communities around the reserve through our sister company Africa Foundation, and doing some really, really good work, because now the youth, as you said, is key, and so the more people we can make aware of what's going on, the better.
And then, apart from educating the youth, Alfred also wants to know, are we in contact with other scientists across Africa? Are we actually sharing our knowledge with one another?
Yeah, so we've got a huge network now of pangolin scientists, not only in Africa but in Asia and all other parts of the world, in the States, in Canada, from the UK, from Oxford University, lots and lots, Malaysia, sure, I can go on for ages, but they're a member of the IUCN Species Survival Commission Pangolin Specialist Group, and a lot of them are not just scientists but rehabilitation experts, veterinarians that all bring in collective knowledge on pangolin conservation. Scientific projects undertaken in Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, Kenya, Namibia, South Africa, but they're easily probably close on a dozen active scientific projects on pangolins at the moment, not only looking into ecology but cultural use in different communities, also molecular data such as the evolutionary origin of pangolins or related closest to pangolins, the trade in pangolins. There's multiple scientific projects that are on the go at the moment, which is just fantastic, and we all communicate, network with one another. And we've got our second International Pangolin Conference in September in Skukuza, Kruger National Park this year.
Yeah. And it's so important that we all share this knowledge that's out there, because all those unknown questions that we were talking about earlier, somebody else might have the answer to something we don't even know or have even thought of. But then we also have a question from RDJ who wants to know, how does one become a volunteer? I think, there's two different ways to become a volunteer. So at andBeyond Phinda, we do run a volunteer program through which people can participate without having any prior background on any conservation-related field. And through that, you will help us monitor any of our priority species. That's not pangolin specific only. It does include the other species we have here at andBeyond Phinda Private Game Reserve, such as lion, cheetah, elephant, buffalo, rhino, to name a few, to answer that specific question. But I know Nikki and them at the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital also take on volunteers, but they're looking for people with specific veterinary background. Nikki?
We do take on veterinary students and vets from all over the world as interns. You just need to find our email address on our social media and drop us a line. But I also wanted to talk about the vets networking. We're talking about the scientists networking. Yeah. The vets, our vet, Dr. Corinne Lawrence and Kelsey Skinner, network with vets across Africa. We get a call from Uganda, or we'll get a call from Malawi or Zambia, wherever it is, from a vet who's suddenly got a pangolin in their hand. And it's so incredible, the network that's been built up amongst the vets, which helps so many pangolins that we don't even see.
Absolutely.
And you can get onto Zoom. They can take blood. We can help them interpret those bloods, and it's just amazing. So it helps pangolins in deepest, darkest.
And even Dr. Lawrence speaks to vets in Vietnam, and they find
India.
things.
She's just helped one in India.
And it's this sort of global, because it's a crazy animal. Its physiology is unique. Where to put a needle in, we don't know, and all sorts of ways and treatments that vets around the world, and the Johannesburg Wildlife Hospital has been absolutely key in sort of spearheading this, but not just keeping the knowledge but rolling it out to the rest of Africa and the rest of Asia. And it's very important to keep these communication channels open. And one thing we do at the African Pangolin Working Group is we provide training workshops also to our neighbouring countries and countries in Africa. We've been invited by Botswana. We're going to Mozambique next year, hopefully even Namibia later this year or early next year. But just to share knowledge and network, because it's such a unique group of mammals, and we're only finding out certain things right now.
So that involves law enforcement officers, scientists, veterinarians, the judiciary. We've done separate training with all sorts of people from the legal system. And it all helps us to fight the war for pangolins.
Because the important thing about species conservation, and we've seen it in rhino, is segregation. One police unit doesn't learn about that, and the judiciary hasn't heard about this, and and local nature conservation don't, but we've kind of brought them into one room with pangolins and nature reserves on the ground and rangers on the ground like you guys, all working collectively together, and it's certainly been good for pangolins.
Very beneficial in this country.
For sure.
It's been great.
Yeah. But moving away from volunteers and coming back to pangolins, Rochelle wanted to know, how would the absence of a pangolin affect the environment?
I'm going to get myself in trouble. A pangolin is a solitary, nocturnal, territorial animal, which are very, very few and far between. They eat large volumes of ants and termites, but they don't eat enough, as far as I'm concerned, to have any impact on an ecosystem at all, or any particular nest at all. We've seen queen ants go through what's termed a mortality rate hypothesis, where as you start foraging on them, they're double clutching in their eggs, and they're reproducing more and more eggs. You'd really have to have a platoon of pangolins 24/7 in 2 hectares to make a significant difference. In terms of theories such as aerating the soil, you'd have to have a whole brace of pangolins. So I'm the philosophy that I don't think they'll have any significant knock-on effect if they're reduced from an ecosystem. Of course, it's debatable, but my thing is, if they disappear from an ecosystem, a region, a country, range states, and it's because of man, I think it's embarrassing, to say the least. And if we're not doing everything to protect them because they're only disappearing because of us, which is the case for the entire order, then we need to try everything we can.
Yeah, very important to try and persevere what is still out there. Craig, you've been part of the project for quite some time. What have you found the trickiest aspect of this whole reintroduction project?
I think definitely the long hours, as we've spoken about. These are animals that have been compromised. They've been in the illegal wildlife trade. They require intensive monitoring. It's so important to pick up if there is some underlying condition, to get it early so that we can get the veterinary help from Nikki and her team and make sure the pangolin pulls through. But that requires a lot of long hours in the field, and as we've been speaking, they're mostly nocturnal. So monitoring these animals means lots of long hours walking through the bush at night. So we've had our fair share of encounters, and my tree climbing abilities definitely improved. So I definitely think that's been probably the only challenge is working in new work conditions. I mean, there's no hand guide as to how to operate monitoring pangolins at night. But we've learnt a lot, and it's been challenging but fun.
I think the sort of the whole process of retrieving them out the trade into the hospital, discharge, and then the release team has got huge work. It's intense hours, long hours, and in the beginning even more so, because you don't know that it's a new place of freedom. It's new sights, smells, maybe different ants, and it's alarming to the individual pangolin and getting used to it. And you guys have to subtly, gently, ease them into it. It's a huge amount of work. It's amazing.
Yeah. But I think, if you look at where we've come from, I think in the beginning it was so intense. Yeah. But because we've learned throughout this process, and also with improvement of technology, it's actually become a lot more manageable. And so although I say it's very difficult, it's definitely achievable with the right attitude and rewarding.
And just understanding the animal a bit more, the actual species a bit more. It's not such an unknown quantity. Initially when you first got Louis, for instance, or the first pangolin that came onto the reserve, it was like me with that first one. You don't know what it's about. How to, it feels so much more intense. Yeah. So now you've relaxed into it and feel a little bit more experienced.
For myself, the trickiest aspect have definitely been to try and locate and monitor these animals. Luckily, each of them here at andBeyond Phinda, they're fitted with 2 different tags. Have a closer look at these tags and how they help us to keep monitoring these animals post-release.
Every single pangolin has 2 different tags attached to them. The one is your VHF tag, that will be the one with the antenna on it, and then also the satellite tag. So the VHF tag we use the telemetry with to locate them. Of course, the closer we get to them, the louder the beeps. And then the satellite tag we've set onto a certain custom schedule to give us an update as how the animals are moving out and about. And the data that we get from it is what time are they emerging out of the burrows, what time are they going back into the burrows, and also how long are they spending out every night. In summer months they are extremely nocturnal, only coming out quite late at night, anything between 8 and 10, where in winter it's a complete shift. As it cools down, of course, start becoming active a lot earlier, and we've even noticed activity levels sometimes emerging at 11 o'clock in the morning on extremely cold days. We're working with African wildlife tracking and to develop these little tags, what tags do not break off of pangolins. Because they are burrowing animals, they're extremely hard on the tag. They don't walk on any game paths like any other animal. They'll literally pick the thickest vegetation to walk through. Sometimes the antenna of the tags just snap off.
Then we've got a question from Mark Ray Coven, who would like to know, do these tags interfere with the pangolins? Craig, I'm going to direct that question to you.
Yeah, I think these pangolins are 80 million years old. They've obviously designed to not have these devices on their backs, so I think we would be naive to say they have no impact whatsoever. But what we've done through a lot of research and development is made them as inconspicuous and as least distracting for the animals as possible. So we've designed them with a specific break-off mechanism so that if one of them does get caught in a branch of a tree, or if a lion or a leopard tries to grab the pangolin, the only thing they can actually grab is the tag. So we've designed a weak point in that so that the tag will come off and the pangolin will be absolutely fine. So they used to be a lot bigger and bulkier, and so long story short is we've deployed a vast number of these across not only pangolins here but all of the release sites, and we've never had problems caused directly by the tags. If anything, it's a better foot grip for the pangolin pups to hold onto the back of their moms as they're cruising around. But no, they don't. I haven't documented any behavioural constraints because of the tags.
So we've also had a look at some video footage of camera tags of our pangolins in our Limpopo release site with a young pup. And the tag didn't inhibit the pup holding on to mom or getting on to mom, and maybe even assisted in a way. But as Craig mentioned, we've had this sort of evolution over the last 7-8 years of different designs that are now much more flexible. They're not laterally on the body, they're more dorsal, they're not so high up on the back, they're lower down towards the tail. So it has been an experimental process, all to the benefit of the pangolin. We never have tags more than about 3.5% of body weight, and young pangolins we release, we don't release any of them out of the hospital until they're sort of 6.5 kilograms. We've had some hard lessons, where we've released pangolins a little bit too young, but it's knowledge we didn't know, that when do they wean from mom, when are they out on their own, when are they mature enough. So 6.5 kilograms, we found that they're okay with the tags. They're strong enough, their survival and their longevity is really, really good. So we've learned some hard lessons, but for the future of the pangolins going forward, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah. And then we have another question from Ted, directed to Nikki. Ted is asking, how does pangolins cope with the cold?
They don't like the cold. They really don't like the cold. So in the hospital, we try and temperature control their environment as much as possible. I understand that their burrows in the wild are a constant around about 23, 24 degrees. And in the wild, they go into those burrows and they're a constant 23 or 24 degrees. They don't have their blankies with them like they do in the hospital. But they are in a temperature-controlled environment in their burrows. Yeah.
So we've got a comment from Bill. He's saying, thank you guys for what you're doing. It keeps his faith in humanity. And I think we need more people out there that are really trying to persevere, whether it be pangolins or rhinos to safeguard what is still out there in the
Cheers,
wild.
Bill.
Yes,
Thank you very
thanks,
much, Bill.
Thanks for your support.
Yeah, you know, the public support is the point of the spear. Every pangolin we retrieve was from a member of public intelligence that they witnessed the animal, and just social media is unbelievably powerful. Share this, share that. What is that creature? Learn more about it. If people don't understand that the contribution they make is huge, even though you're living in Europe or Brazil or Canada, it makes a significant difference, and spreading the awareness is collectively is hugely powerful. So yeah, it's been great having everybody on tonight.
Yeah, and then everyone, it seems like we are starting to head to the close of the program. We would like to say thank you from everyone for joining us tonight for our special segment on pangolins on WildEarth, and it's been great to be able to talk to you about our beloved pangolins. As we all know, conservation starts with a conversation. For those that are interested in learning more about the project, please head on over to the andBeyond Phinda website and check out the page on the reintroduction program, as well as head on over to the African Pangolin Working Group website, the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Clinic website as well, to learn more about what is being done to carry on the perseverance of these animals. And for those of you that are watching on WildEarth, please stay tuned to catch a special glimpse of these animals. We never know what we might be finding out there in the wild. Yeah, and from our side...